first thing I would usually say for the FAFSA meeting is I get a lot of questions to begin with about who is the custodial parent. Another question is usually, if my student has their own taxes, can they file on their own and be what's considered an independent student? So if you're running into those types of questions, let me just address those real quick from the start. The parent who would be considered a custodial parent, this only matters in a situation where the parents are either separated or divorced. It comes down to, first, the test is whichever parent provided the majority of financial support over the last 12 months, that's going to be the custodial parent. If in the situation where it's both parents provided equal, the FAFSA usually calls for whichever parent then has the majority of the income would default as the custodial parent. So in this meeting, I can't give anyone any like personal advice just because I'm kind of going over what the generalities of the FAFSA rules say. But hopefully that makes sense. The other part would be for a dependent student. They're always going to be a dependent student when we're pursuing a bachelor's degree, even if they have their own tax return, if they're working and so forth. There will be a few nuances to that I'm going to actually cover in the FAFSA overview that would qualify a student to not be a dependent, but it's very rare that I see this happen, but I'm going to go through that. Last thing is always fill out a FAFSA. I know some of you are like, this is going to be a waste of time. Why do I do this? I'm not going to qualify. Believe it or not, it's a way for them to index the family to just see what types of financial aid you could qualify for. It can't hurt you. Some parents might think about if a school is need aware, which means that they are basing some of their admissions decision on how much financial aid the family may qualify for. In general, it's always good to file the forms. And then the other form that I won't be able to get to cover tonight is called the CSS profile. Majority of schools do not require this, but a few do. So if you're applying to some private schools, for example, USC, just be on the lookout. If those schools do require not just the FAFSA, but the CSS profile, make sure that you do complete that as well. So this is going to be the home page, everyone. When you go to the FAFSA, it's always going to be a .gov website, studentaid.gov. And remember that you have two federal student aid IDs that we're going to be using. The one federal student aid, for short, it's FSA, is for the student who we're applying for. They're going to need their own. And then second to that is the parent who will be completing this document. They're going to need their own FSA ID. So that's usually the most time-consuming part. One of the things that's different this year is the student needs to log in to complete the student section, and then the parent has to log in separately to complete the parent section, whereas before it was just one fluid form, and then you could sign it together. When we start this, we're going to do the 24-25 FAFSA form, and we're going to do start new form. When we do start new form, we're going to log in using the student's FSA ID and their password. So when you set this up, it's either a username or an email that's associated with the student. We're going to click login. We're going to click here, student, on the left-hand side, and continue. State of residence, and then it's asking when the student became a legal resident of California. So case specific here, and then we're going to click continue. The biggest thing this year, in order to have this FAFSA go through seamlessly, is to provide consent. And what that means is you're giving approval to the Federal Student Aid Commission to link any of your federal information that's on file with the IRS, to sequence that into your FAFSA form so that you don't have to manually input these figures. This is the way that the colleges would prefer that you submit your FAFSA. And now it's going to ask for the personal circumstances for the student. These next few questions are really what's going to determine if the student is in fact a dependent student versus an independent. So they want to know the current marital status for the student. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be single, never married. We're going to choose here for the 24-25 school year that the student is going to be a freshman. And we're going to indicate no, that we will not already have a bachelor's degree by the time they start in the 24-25 school year. So we'll select no. So these are really the qualifiers, everyone, when you get to this page, that will determine if you answer any of these in the affirmative, it will qualify your student as a independent. Student other circumstances. So they're asking if the student at any point was homeless during this time frame. So either yes or no. I'm going to click no here. And then any unusual circumstances. So that would prevent the student from contacting their parent. So these are the new qualifiers in this year's FAFSA that is a little bit different. So if that's the case, you'll indicate that here. Otherwise, put no. And then there are certain cases where the student and the parent, they're unwilling to provide their information. So they're asking here, due to unusual circumstances, is the parent unable or unwilling to provide that? So if that's the case, then you can click here. This goes into the FAFSA system, everyone, and then that gets dispersed directly to the colleges that you have on your list. The individual colleges, once they retrieve this data from the FAFSA, they can then make determinations based on their own protocol. So they can basically get back to you and say, hey, we need this documentation to substantiate what you're claiming here. So they can actually do follow-up to make sure that everything that you're indicating is in fact accurate. So in most cases that I see, we're going to select no here. They're going to ask here, are the parents married to each other? So this is case specific here, yes or no. Now, at this juncture, what we're going to do is include one parent's information over here where it says parent who will fill out this form. And really, this is the recommended thing. So only include one parent when we get to this stage. Don't provide both. Only the parent that has registered for the FSA ID or who will get the FSA ID is who we're going to indicate here. Their personal information along with social security information. And what this is going to do once we get to this stage and we click invite, it's going to send that parent an email with an invitation to say, we want you to accept so that you can complete the next segment of the FAFSA. So it'll automatically send an invitation to the parent when we get here. Student demographic information. So this will be what you'll indicate here. And if it's asking for these specific identifiers, you can go ahead and indicate. It's totally okay if you also decide to choose prefer not to answer. And then whether the student is a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, you can indicate that here. If they have an alien registration number based on this selection, you can include that. Eligible non-citizen too. Otherwise, you're a US citizen. And then here, it's really just asking for the parent's level of education. And notice how they'll say one or both parents attended college, but neither completed college. So if that is the case, parents who's filling this out, if you maybe attended some college, but never went all the way through for a bachelor's, you can click this here. Case specific, hopefully the answer here is no. So now this is where we get to identify the high school. So what's going to happen through the counseling side of the high school is they're going to send a what's called a GPA verification form directly to the Cal Grant Commission. Make note, the high school sends what's called a GPA verification form directly to the Cal Grant Commission. Eventually, once you submit this FAFSA, you're going to set up an account with CSAC, CSAC, and that's what the California Student Aid Commission's website. The student will create their own portal with them. Once the Cal Grant or the middle class scholarship, if you qualify for those, if that gets awarded to you and you attend a college within the state of California, you can actually manage that dashboard on CSAC, California Student Aid Commission website, and point the grant to the school that you'll be attending. Or you could just manage all the Cal Grant and the middle class scholarship information on that website. And then here it's going to ask if the student has completed a 2022 tax return. And it's asking for the balances for these answers, everyone, as of today. So as of the day that you fill out this document, they want to know what are the balances the day that you complete these forms. It's not going back and looking back to 2022, even though they're asking for income there. They want to know as of today, when you're filling this out, what are the balances, either for the cash savings in the student's name or for any investments that are in the student's name. And if they own any other type of entity, now this year's FAFSA is actually asking for you to put in a value for the business, which they've never done in the past. So just to clarify, everyone, retirement accounts do not get included at all when you fill out the FAFSA whatsoever. So if it's under the umbrella of any type of retirement account, 401k, IRA, pension, KEO plan, anything like that, that gets eliminated from anywhere being inputted into your FAFSA. So please don't make that mistake. Otherwise, the types of investments that they do ask for and that you'll indicate are, for example, money market accounts, CDs, bonds, stocks, mutual funds, investment properties. These would be what they consider to be investments. However, if the student does have a Coogan account or a UTMA account, which is called a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act, or sometimes it's a UGMA account, those are in fact a student asset. And then in this section is where we get to input all the colleges that your student has on the list. Now notice this year it went from 10 schools that you can include up to 20. So that's a really good thing. You can include all of the schools that you're applying to. Once you've indicated the college, it'll bring up the college's profile, then click select. And then the next move, if you're going to add another school, is you're going to go right here to search more schools, and then it'll bring this up again. So you can keep adding. If the scenario is the student has more than 20 schools, what you're going to do is submit with the 20 that you have initially. And then once your FAFSA has been processed, you can come back at a later time, usually after a few days, and you'll notice that the FAFSA is going to say processed. Then once it says that, you can come back to this section and modify the schools by removing whichever schools you have that you need to add, and then you can add the other ones after you do that. Let's say the student adds another college down the line. No problem. Just come back into your FAFSA and make those additions as you need. Once we get to this stage, everyone, it's going to have you go through each section. If you want to do the drop down on each one, just to make sure that all of the information is correct before you do the next step, which is the signature, then that would be a good idea. This is the summary page for the student section. So at this stage, it's going to say the parents have been provided an invitation, invite sent. And then now is the parent's opportunity to complete their section. The second part, everyone, so this is going to be where the parent should have already received an invitation from the student. And what we're going to do now is utilize the parent's FSA ID. When we do that, again, we're going to go to FAFSA.gov, studentaid.gov, same thing. And then we're going to click here, access existing form. Click that. And remember, again, we're going to do the 24-25 school year. They're going to ask if you want to accept the invitation. Go ahead and do that. And then here is where it says provide consent. So it's usually like right when you log in. So it's going to say provide for the approval for the student to be ineligible for federal student aid. So that's what we need to do, is provide the consent here. It's giving the education department the ability to disclose these information to the IRS and so forth, Social Security Administration. Then it's going to ask for the parent's marital status. So here it's based on your situation. So you'll indicate that here. And then it's going to ask for very specific information on your financial situation. So here, just look and see if you don't qualify, if you don't receive any of these, then you don't need to indicate. What you could always do, families, is if you have a question on what any of these are, if you were to click this icon right next to it, it would bring up a pop-up like this for the earned income tax credit, and it'll show you, okay, so it's on your 1040 line 27. So you'd be able to see, okay, maybe I have that, maybe I don't. So if you do have questions about any of these, just you could click right here. And then the next one is going to ask if the parents have already filed their 22 joint tax return. So either yes or no. Most likely the answer is going to be yes, because you should have done that unless there's certain circumstances. Family size. So now it's going to ask for whether or not the total number of people in your household that you're financially responsible for are listed as dependents on your taxes. So if it's any different, then you're going to indicate yes. And this would be a situation where, let's say, a grandparent lives with you, or you're financially supporting someone, but they're not necessarily listed on your taxes as a dependent, then you can say yes. Otherwise, if all things are equal and the whole family is listed on your tax return as a dependent, then you'll just click no and then continue. Here, so for the family, let's say that had twins, you'll indicate 2 here. They're asking how many family members are going to be in college during this time frame, and unfortunately, we cannot include parents as part of that number. So it will really only be the dependents here. Very specific. So if you happen to have received these, majority of the families that I see coming out of high school, they're not going to have this, but this might be case specific based on your situation. And then foreign earned income exclusion, parents, if you have a question about this, again, icon, you can do that. Some families, FAFSA may look different because it may be that you don't have what's called a rollover. So there may be 1 or 2 slides that I'm going to talk about that may not show up on your FAFSA. So don't freak out if you don't see this specific page. A lot of you will not, because you didn't have a situation called a rollover. But be aware on your 1040 tax return, if let's say you went from one employer to another and you had a situation where, let's say, your retirement account went from one entity to another, that's just called a rollover, meaning that you didn't take money out of your retirement. It just went from one place to another. That would usually be indicated on your tax return, usually under line 4 or 5 as like a IRA rollover, something like that. And it will actually say next to it that it was a rollover. If that was the case, make sure that you just indicate the amount of the rollover right here, so that it doesn't, what happens is if you don't include that, the FAFSA software will think that that's like untaxed income, and it's going to kick out a calculation that's not true. So just be sure if that's the case, and that you'll indicate the amount of rollover right there. And then case specific if this is your situation here. Again, when you click on that icon, it'll show you for the foreign earned income exclusion 1040 Schedule 1 line 8D. So you could see that right here, whether you have that or not. Child support received. So if it's a married filing jointly, this is not going to be something here. If you are a single parent who's filling this out, and if you did in fact receive child support, then you'll indicate that here. And then parent assets. Remember, this is as of the day that you're completing this form. So they want to know what's the total balance is here. Same as your investments. And we are not including retirement accounts again. We are not including your primary residence. Be sure that we don't make that silly mistake. So we don't include the home that you live in is not considered part of your net worth, and neither are the retirement accounts. There are ways for some schools to follow up and ask for more verification documentation. So if you do own a business, they're asking this year for you to put in a value for it. I understand that sometimes it's very difficult for you to have a valuation. Maybe speak with your tax person to help you determine what that is. Okay, and then at this point, if it's they're going to ask for the other parent information, so you're going to go ahead and provide that here. Again, the parent isn't providing, the second parent is not providing a signature. They just want to get a profile for them, so you can include that here. And then you could do the same when we get to this stage. You can do the drop down and just verify if all of the documentation that you've provided is true, is accurate, and then click on continue to do the signature. So this is going to confirm that you understand the consent, and that what you're going to do here is click yes. And this is going to basically be your electronic signature, and continue. So that's what it's going to bring you to. It's going to have a congratulations, the form is complete. And that is the FAFSA for this year.